The judge burst out laughing when I stood in chains until I recited a federal statute from memory that left the entire courtroom silent and left him visibly shaking. He thought I was just a homeless man, but he did not know I used to teach law to people like him. This was not just a case. This was a reckoning. "He is back again," the clerk whispered, barely hiding her smirk. I saw her tilt her head toward the courtroom door as I limped through it, cuffs chafing against my wrists. Her voice was not loud, but it was sharp enough to slice through the brittle air, like a blade. "Third time this year. Probably stole a soda or some moldy bread." Laughter followed. Quiet, cruel, like rats feasting in the shadows. And then came the sound that always made my bones ache more than the cold concrete. I would slept on the night before the slow, theatrical clap of Judge Jefferson Stone. The Honorable Judge Stone. They say power corrupts, but in his case, it did not corrupt. It rotted, from the inside out. "Well, well, well," he said, his robe flowing like a cape as he leaned forward from his high seat. "Look what the alley cats dragged in." The courtroom chuckled. I did not say a word. I just stood there. In my tattered olive jacket, the only thing I'd left from my former life, with holes on both elbows and a button missing at the collar. My jeans sagged from the hips, stained with rain and dirt from sleeping near the subway vents. My boots, once polished every Sunday, were now barely holding together with glue and mercy. I had showered 3 days ago in the back of a church that offered kindness, but not enough towels. My hair, once jet black and neatly parted, now carried streaks of silver and a tangled defiance. My beard grew uneven, not for style, but survival. But my eyes had not changed. They still carried the sharpness of a man who once stood behind a podium with the seal of the United States Court of Appeals shining behind him. But no one here saw that. To them, I was just another homeless man, a waste of court time. "State your name for the record," barked the bailiff. "Michael James Halbrook." I replied. Voice steady. There was a pause. Even the judge blinked at the firmness in my tone. Then he scoffed. "Did you hear that, folks?" He gestured to the mostly empty benches, where a couple reporters and city clerks scribbled lazily. Halbrook. That name sounds familiar. Fancy. Harvard. Was it? Or just a fantasy he cooked up while digging through garbage cans? Another wave of snickers. I did not flinch. But inside, something old stirred. Something I would buried long ago under layers of shame and survival. Halbrook is charged with theft," the day announced flatly. A sandwich, bottle of water, and a half-eaten apple taken from Harriet's Deli on 5th. That apple was already bitten into, Judge Stone said with a chuckle. "Guess beggars can be choosers." More laughter. The court stenographer tried to suppress a grin. I looked around. No public defender. No advocate. Just a man standing before a wall of mockery and cement, hard cynicism. "Halbrook," the judge said, now feigning seriousness. "Do you understand the charges against you?" I nodded. "Do you wish to plead guilty or not guilty?" I stayed silent for a beat longer than I should have. Not because I did not know, but because I remembered the words, the weight of that question, the consequence carried in every syllable. Not guilty, I said. The courtroom fell momentarily silent. Not guilty, for a man caught on camera, for someone who walked in with no lawyer, no shoes with soles. No chance. Stone leaned back, squinting. Oh, and on what basis, sir? Do you believe yourself innocent of theft? I raised my chin slightly. On the basis of necessity, I said. Doctrine of necessity. Subsection under common law tradition, referenced in United States v. Holmes, 26 Caz. 360. The air changed. You could feel it. One of the junior clerks actually stopped typing. The judge's fingers, mid-reach toward his coffee mug, froze. I continued. There was no intent of permanent deprivation. The act was committed in a state of emergency, where survival outweighed property rights. It is not justification. Your Honor, it is context. He stared at me, then laughed. A cruel, dismissive sound that echoed too long for such a small courtroom. Save your lectures for the pigeons in the park. Counselor. He said counselor with dripping sarcasm. But he was not ready for what would come next. I did not fight. Not yet. I would watch the system from the outside long enough. I knew when to speak and when to let the silence work harder than a scream. But something told me, as I was escorted back to holding, that the winds had shifted just slightly. Not much, but just enough to rattle the curtains of the mighty courthouse. For years, they thought I was invisible, but the law still lived inside me. And soon, they would remember exactly who I was. They think I am nothing, that I appeared from nowhere, dirty, broken, desperate. To them, I am just another fixture on the sidewalks of this city, like the rusted trash cans or cracked pavement that no one bothers to fix. But they never stopped to ask who I was, who I used to be. My name is Michael James Halbrook, 62 years old. American, once a son, once a husband, once a father, and yes, once a federal attorney with a flawless record and a corner office 3 blocks from Capitol Hill. Now, I sleep behind dumpsters and read court decisions by moonlight. But I was not born into poverty. Quite the opposite. My father was a school principal in Cincinnati, and my mother was a librarian who never let me leave for school without a book in my hand. We were not rich, but we had pride, and my parents raised me to believe in rules, in fairness, in truth. That is probably why I loved the law so much. It felt like a structure no storm could shake. I graduated top of my class from Georgetown Law. Clerked for Judge Merriman, a titan in the appellate world. Then, I became the youngest prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia to argue and win a case before the Fourth Circuit. They said I was going to be a Supreme Court contender by 50. They said I was unstoppable. They were wrong, because no one is unstoppable when life decides to be cruel. I met Clarissa in the spring of '89. She had a laugh like jazz and eyes that crew through every ambition I wore like armor. She was my balance, the one who reminded me that justice was not just in the books, it was in how we treated the janitor, the waitress, the man sweeping the courthouse steps. When our daughter Madison was born, I swore I would protect them with everything I had, and for 10 years, I did, until one snowy December, one red light, one drunk driver, 1 second that shattered 30 years of everything. They were gone before I arrived at the hospital. I did not cry at first. I worked, buried myself in motions and hearings, tried federal cases like a machine, but the soul behind every argument was gone. I began missing deadlines, drinking just to sleep, just to feel nothing. My firm put me on leave, then fired me. Friends stopped calling. No one knew what to say to a man who had lost his wife, his child, and his mind all in under a year. The house went next, sold below market value just to cover the hospital bills I was too proud to ask help with. Then the car, then the suits, then the man I used to be. I drifted. Shelters, corners, charity lines. But even there, I could not let go of who I had been. I would help other men draft their PSI appeals, coach women on how to ask for continuances. I became a ghost with a gavel invisible, but not silent. And then, one rainy morning, I found a copy of the Federal Reporter, second series in a library donation box outside an old church. I took it like it was scripture, and every night since, I have read it, remembered it, stored it, because the law is the only thing no one could take from me. I know what people think when they see me now, the sunken cheeks, the weather-stained coat, the muttered words as I walk alone. But behind every wrinkle is a record of someone who once stood toe-to-toe with senators and special prosecutors, who once held justice in his hands. And if I must fight with nothing but my memory and my voice, then so be it. Because the courtroom I walked into yesterday may have thought they were judging a homeless man, but I am Michael James Halbrook. And this fight, this one is personal. There is a moment when the fall begins, and you think it is just a stumble. Nothing major. You tell yourself you will recover. You always do. I told myself that too, until the ground vanished beneath me. It started with the silence. After the funeral, no one knew what to say. The sympathy cards stopped after a week. The casserole trays and visits faded in a month. I stood alone in a house filled with the echo of my daughter's laughter and the scent of Clarissa's rosewater shampoo that still clung to her pillow. And then I stopped showing up to court. Not because I did not want to, but because I could not. I would wake up and stare at my suit hanging in the closet, the one I wore the day Clarissa first saw me in court. It mocked me. I would sit at the dining table with my briefcase open and not touch a single file. There were days I could not speak. Could shave. Could eat. The firm's managing partner James Mcintyre, a man I would mentored, once called me into his office. He spoke softly at first, like a man offering a seat to a sinking ghost. "We are worried about you." "Michael," he said. I nodded, eyes empty. "You missed the deposition for the Kavanaugh case. You filed the motion to dismiss without exhibits. That is not like you." He was not wrong, but he also was not ready to hear my answer. "My daughter was 10, I said. She wanted to be a violinist. My wife, she was the kind of person who cried during courtroom victories because she believed the law could heal people." James did not look at me after that. They placed me on leave. Paid leave? At first. Then unpaid. Then came the envelope. Termination effective immediately. I stared at it for hours, like it might vanish. But it did not. I tried therapy. Once. I sat in a chair across from a man who had never lost anyone and watched him write down words like grief response and detachment disorder, while I tried to remember how it felt to laugh. So I turned to the bottle. First it was whiskey, then gin, then whatever was on sale. I pawned my watch, then my wedding ring, then Clarissa's necklace. The last thing I sold was the violin Madison never learned to play. I held it like it was her heart in my hands, and I let it go. That is when the eviction notice came. I would missed 4 months of mortgage payments. The letters had piled up beneath pizza menace and unopened mail. The day they changed the locks, I sat on the steps with my last suitcase and listened to the wind push leaves across the porch. No one from the firm called. No one from the neighborhood stopped. The first night I slept on the street. I still thought it was temporary. I wore my tie. It rained. Hard. And no one noticed a man in a $1,000 suit curled under a bus stop bench, shivering next to his own broken past. Weeks turned into months. The tie was the first to go, then the dress shoes, then the belief that I could ever go back. I tried shelters, but they were full of men like me, ghosts of fathers and husbands, haunted by choices, trapped in loops of regret and addiction. We shared stories like currency, bartered memories for scraps of respect. I began to read again, law books in libraries, left out copies of the Constitution. I kept my mind sharp. If my body was failing, at least my thoughts remained untouched. Every so often, I would help someone draft a letter for a landlord, cite a law in traffic court, explain housing code to a frightened mother with 2 kids. I became a nameless advocate in a system that had no place for me anymore. One day, a young man named Tyrell, no older than 19, asked me why I still bothered. "You got nothing, old man," he said. "Why still talk like you some professor?" I looked him dead in the eye. Because even if the world throws you away, I told him, you do not have to throw away yourself. He nodded, but I am not sure he understood. Sometimes I did not either, but I kept speaking. I kept remembering, because deep inside, behind the grime and the scars and the endless cold, I still believed foolishly, stubbornly that maybe, just maybe, there'd come a day where the law would hear me again. That day came. In that courtroom, when Judge Stone laughed, and I reminded him who I really was. It was Tuesday. I remember because that is the day the bakery near 5th Street throws out the bread that does not sell over the weekend. They leave it in clear bags behind the dumpster, not locked up, not labeled waste. Just discarded. Forgotten. Kind of like me. But that morning, I did not make it in time. By the time I reached the alley, the bags were already torn open, scattered by raccoons. Or maybe someone hungrier than me. I found nothing but crumbs and the faint scent of rosemary focaccia, now soaked in rain. I stood there, staring at moldy crusts, stomach screaming in protest. It had been 2 days since I would eaten anything more than a stale pretzel someone dropped near the train station. I could be walked away, but my legs carried me, like they had a will of their own, toward Harry's Deli 3 blocks east. Harry's was not just a deli, it was an institution, family-run since 1952. Big, bold red sign that said "We feed the neighborhood," in font that had not changed since Eisenhower. I used to go there with Clarissa and Madison after church. The same woman who once stood beside me at the counter now had her smile etched into my memories like stained glass. I hesitated at the door. My reflection stared back gaunt cheeks. Tattered coat, old bloodstain on the collar. I would forgotten was even there. I stepped inside. The bell jingled. The young clerk at the counter, maybe 20. Skinny frame, bleach blonde hair with black roots, looked up. His eyes narrowed the way people do when they have already decided who you are. "Hey, you can loiter in here," he called out. "I am not loitering," I said quietly. "Just looking. Looking do not pay." He muttered, grabbing a mop like it was a weapon. I walked the aisles slowly. I did not want money. I did not even want pity. I just wanted something warm. Something that did not come from a trash bin. I found it in the back cooler, a wrapped ham and cheese sandwich. I picked it up, weighed it in my hand like it was gold. And that is when the shame kicked in. I looked around. No one was watching, or so I thought. I tucked the sandwich into my coat and turned toward the door. 3 steps. That is all I got. Then the alarm shrieked. The young clerk came flying around the counter, fury in his eyes. Thief. He grabbed my arm, yanked it hard. Too hard. I stumbled, hit the side of a shelf, knocking over cans of soup. "I will call the cops," he shouted, holding his phone up like a badge of honor. Listen, I tried. I was going to return it. I just needed a minute. "Don T talk?" He snarled. "You people always got excuses." You people. That is all I was to him, a walking stereotype. Not a man, not a father, not someone who once knew the weight of a federal bench. The officers arrived in 4 minutes. 2 cruisers, lights, sirens, like I would held the deli hostage. One was a rookie, nervous, fingers twitching near his holster. The other, Sergeant Lanning, broad-shouldered, crew cut, face carved from granite. He would arrested me once before, for trespassing in a church vestibule during winter. He smiled like he would just won something. "Well, if it is not Professor Sandwich," he said. The rookie laughed. They cuffed me before I could explain. Tight, always tighter than necessary. Outside, a small crowd gathered, people with phones. Some recording. Some whispering. Old homeless guy stole food. Someone muttered. Again, I wanted to scream. To tell them about Clarissa. About Madison. About me. But all I said was, I was hungry. Lanning shoved me into the cruiser. Yeah, world's hungry too. Halbrook, done to mean it gets a free lunch. The sandwich lay on the pavement. Crushed, a badge of shame soaked in mayonnaise and street water. In the back of the police car, I stared at my reflection in the plexiglass. The man who once prosecuted criminals now looked like one. But worse than that, no one seemed to care why. There is a sound I will never forget, the screech of rusted hinges as the courtroom door creaked open, and they marched me in like a stray mutt to be judged and put down. The coldness of the room did not come from the air conditioner. It came from the eyes. from the way everyone looked at me. Like I was already guilty. Like I did not belong. The bailiff's grip on my arm was unnecessarily tight. Not to keep me from escaping, I had nowhere to go, but to remind me that I had no power here. I would worn shackles like these before, in courtrooms across the country, but never on me, never as the defendant. This time, I was not standing behind the bar. I was behind the shame. Judge Jefferson Stone towered above us all on his bench. Robe pristine, glasses balanced at the tip of his nose. He scanned the file in front of him and raised an eyebrow. "Michael James Halbrook," he said slowly, as if tasting something sour. "Back again." There was a smattering of laughter from the gallery. Stone turned to the public defender next to me, a woman no older than 28. Blonde ponytail. Rushed mascara. Her name was Shelley Brookman, and it was clear from the get-go she had not read my case. As Brookman, Judge Stone said dryly, "Do you believe your client understands the charges?" She glanced at me like I was a stack of paperwork she did not want to file. "Yes, Your Honor." "He understands. I can speak for myself," I said. Stone's gavel struck the wood like a hammer to a coffin. "You will speak when I tell you to." Brookman sighed. I turned and looked at her, my voice low. "I would like to represent myself." Her head snapped back. "I do not think that is wise, ma." "Halbrook, I know it is not wise." I interrupted, "But it is necessary." Stone peered down at me, amused. "You have done this dance before." "Halbrook, let me guess." Necessity defense. Emotional trauma. Society failed you, so you stole a sandwich. Laughter again. Even the stenographer cracked a grin. "This court is not a stage," he said. "We do not indulge fantasies here. You are not Perry Mason. You are a repeat offender with a penchant for deli meat and dramatic monologues." His words were blades, thrown with the precision of someone who had long forgotten the humanity behind the names in his docket. I clenched my fists. "You call it theft," I said calmly. "I call it survival." Stone rolled his eyes. "Save it for sentencing." Then the prosecution stood. A young man in a tight gray suit, Assistant Colin Reddick. Fresh-faced. Ambitious, with that unmistakable arrogance of a man who had never known hunger. "Your Honor," he began, "the defendant has a long history of petty offenses. Trespassing. Vagrancy. Public urination. And now, theft." He paused to smirk. "We request a 6-month sentence in county jail, citing repeat offenses and lack of rehabilitation potential." Brookman said nothing. She did not even object. I looked over at her, stunned. "Nothing?" I asked. She shrugged. "You are not exactly an easy sell, ma." Halbrook. And there it was, in this room built on justice. The assumption of worthlessness was stronger than the presumption of innocence. Judge Stone adjusted his robe and leaned forward. "Ma. Halbrook," he said, "you have wasted enough of this city's time. You claim knowledge of the law. Then you should know when to plead guilty and ask for mercy." I stood straighter. There is no mercy in a system that does not listen. He narrowed his eyes. You want to impress us? Quote a statute. Tell us why you think you are above the law. I stared at him not with anger, but with clarity. I had once sat where he sat. I had once worn the black robe. But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that justice was not made for convenience. It was made for courage. I cleared my throat. Under United States v. Holmes, 26 Cas. 360. The doctrine of necessity allows for the breaking of the law to prevent greater harm. Stone scoffed. Is that supposed to mean something? I did not flinch. It means I was starving. I did not hurt anyone. I did not break a window. I took food that would have been thrown out in 20 minutes. That is not theft. That is desperation. You still broke the law, he said flatly. And the law, I said, my voice rising, is not a sword to punish the poor. It is a shield to protect the vulnerable. Gasps rippled. The silence afterward was sharp. Stone's face hardened. You will be sentenced Friday. Until then, remanded to county lockup. The gavel fell again, but this time, it did not feel like the end. As they led me away, I saw something shift in the clerk's eyes. Doubt, curiosity, maybe even shame. The law had not died in me. It was still there waiting for the moment to strike with violence, but with truth. And the courtroom that once devoured me just been served its first taste of something it did not expect. Resistance. The county jail smells like sweat, metal, and surrender. It echoes. Everything you say gets swallowed up by the cement walls and comes back colder. Smaller. The bunk I am assigned to is in cell block B bottom row, near the toilets, where the broken men sleep and the forgotten ones breathe. They process me like any other. Fingerprints. Mugshot. Strip search. The guard with the barcode tattoo on his neck laughs when he sees my name. Wait, you are the guy who quoted Holmes in court. He smirks, nudging his buddy. We got ourselves a walking legal dictionary. I do not respond, not because I am afraid, but because their laughter is small compared to the storms I have survived. That night, I lie awake on the thin cot, staring at the flickering light overhead. I am surrounded by snores, coughs, muttered prayers. Somewhere, a man weeps into his pillow. Another curses out loud until a guard slams the bars and threatens to take his blanket. I close my eyes and begin to recite. Title 18. Us. Section. I whisper it like scripture, not because I am trying to remember, but because it is the only part of myself I have not let rot. The next morning during chow, a younger inmate named Darnell sits across from me. He has got fire in his eyes, but too much fear in his chest to light it. You really used to be a lawyer, he asks between bites of lumpy oatmeal. Yes. What happened? I look at him. Life. Then death. Then everything in between. He does not laugh. Doesn't he mock? He just nods. Like he gets it more than he should. 2 hours later, I am in the common room when the door slams open and 2 deputies drag me out without explanation. They haul me down the corridor toward an interview room. Inside is Shelley Brookman, the public defender, who'd abandoned me like yesterday's coffee. She looks different today. Her ponytail is tighter, her voice more rehearsed. "You have gone viral," she says. I blink. "What?" She pulls out a tablet, shows me the footage, a shaky courtroom recording someone, posted online. Me, standing in chains, quoting federal law with clarity and fire. The camera pans to Judge Stone. Smirking. It has over 300,000 views. "They are calling you the homeless Harvard. People think you are a fake. I am not." "I know," she says, tapping the screen. "And that is the problem, because now you are a story." I sit down slowly. "Then let us tell it right." She narrows her eyes. "You want to testify?" "No," I say. "I want to represent myself." "For real." She laughs under her breath. "You understand what you are risking. I have already lost everything. I have got nothing to protect except the law inside me." Shelley leans back, studying me. Something in her changes. The girl with the overloaded schedule and jaded eyes melts, just enough to let a human being show through. "I will help," she says quietly. "But you are going to lead. The next 2 days are a blur of prep. I write motions by hand. I pull citations from memory. I coach Shelley through the arguments we will need to beat back the dust narrative." She is skeptical at first, then astonished. "You remember U.S. Varela from 1994, page 172. Holding paragraph. 3rd line. She stares. "You were not a lawyer." She whispers, "You were a weapon." I nod. "I still am." On the day of the hearing, they bring me back into that same courtroom, same marble floor, same crook blinds. But everything is different now. The gallery is packed. Reporters. Law students, a few of my old colleagues. Though I doubt they will admit it. Judge Stone takes the bench, but the confidence is gone from his voice. He has seen the headlines. He has heard the noise. Homeless man schools court with legal mastery. Disbarred. Maybe. Disgraced. Never. Reddick, the day, walks up first. He rattles off the same tired argument about habitual offenses. Public safety. Setting precedent. Then it is my turn. I stand. The courtroom stills. "Your Honor." I begin, voice firm but not angry. The law is not meant to be a sword to punish the weak. It is meant to be a net to catch those falling through the cracks. Reddick interrupts. Objection. Overruled. Stone mutters. I continue. "Yes, I took a sandwich. I broke a law. But the system broke me first. It denied me treatment, shelter, food, dignity. It denied me even a name until I made you remember it." I walk toward the jury box. No jurors. Of course, just the symbol. I am not asking for pity. I am asking for perspective. We throw men like me away every day and expect the streets to solve what society broke. I stop. I am not a criminal. I am a cautionary tale. Silence. For one breathless moment, not even the air to move. Then, somewhere in the back a clap. Then another. Then the whole gallery. Judge Stone bangs the gavel, but no one listens. Because for the first time in a long time, the law did not belong to the robe or the seal. It belonged to the truth, and the truth was standing there, tired, hungry, but unbroken. The crowd outside the courthouse swelled like a wave waiting to crash. I could see them through the dusty glass panels. In the waiting area, students with protest signs, legal aid volunteers handing out pamphlets, reporters holding microphones pointed like bayonets, searching for blood. I would spent decades inside courtrooms just like this, but never had I seen so many people care about someone like me. Because this was not about me anymore. It was about what I represented, a system that pretended to be blind while peeking under its own blindfold to judge by appearance, status, and silence. But not today. Today, silence was broken. It started when a video clip aired on a national morning show. Me, handcuffed, quoting U.S. case law in perfect clarity, while Judge Stone rolled his eyes. A commentator said, "Either this man is a savant, or the justice system just underestimated a genius in rags." Social media took it from there. Hashtags trended. Halbrook not homeless. Justice formical. Law live as an oliphus. And then the phone calls came. Shelley told me first. She ran into the holding cell, eyes wide, breathless. "You are not going to believe this," she said, shoving her phone toward me. "It is him. He wants to speak to you." I stared at the screen. Judge Bernard Crowley, former Chief Justice of the Ninth Circuit Court, my old mentor, the man who once called me the rising conscience of federal law. And now he was on a FaceTime call, blinking at the lens from his brownstone office in Manhattan. "Michael," he said, voice soft with age but heavy with authority. "They said you were gone." I said, barely above a whisper, but I remembered who I was. He nodded slowly. "Good, because the world forgot. It needs reminding." Within hours, letters poured into the court amicus briefs. Sworn affidavits. Character witnesses. Former prosecutors. Law professors. Even a few public defenders from cities I did not even remember trying cases in. All of them said the same thing. Michael James Halbrook is not a thief. He is a man wronged by tragedy, not by criminal intent. He deserves redemption. He deserves a platform. He deserves dignity. Judge Stone's hands trembled the next time he took the bench. This time, the courtroom was not laughing. This time, they were watching him. "You may proceed," he said, voice uneven. I stood, not as a defendant, as a man reclaiming his voice. I have been called many things. I began, vagrant, thief, mentally unstable, but I was never called what I truly was: a man grieving. I took a breath. When my wife and daughter died, I did not just lose my family. I lost my reason to fight. But the law stayed with me, not because I am a lawyer, but because I am a human being. I looked straight at Stone. And the law belongs to all of us, not just the ones in robes, not just the ones in clean suits or fancy offices. Even a man in a tattered coat has the right to be heard. Stone shifted in his seat. I was not done. You sit on that bench with the weight of people's futures in your hands. But for years, you have used that weight to crush, not to uplift. You mock. You dismiss. You forget that behind every charge is a beating heart. Stone opened his mouth. I raised a finger. No. Your Honor. This time, you will listen. Gasps echoed. Someone from the gallery whispered, "He is doing it." I turned toward the crowd. I do not want a parade. I do not want pity. I want reform. I want accountability. And most of all, I want people like the man I was 2 weeks ago, cold, hungry, invisible to be seen before it is too late. There was a silence so thick it rang louder than any gavel ever could. Stone looked down. For once, he had no snide remark, no sarcasm, only a trembling hand resting on a piece of paper he refused to sign yet. Court is adjourned until Friday for sentencing, he said, standing up quickly. But he did not slam the gavel this time, because the judgment had already happened. And it was not on me, it was on him. As I stepped outside, the crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, tears. A young girl held a sign that read, "My dad was homeless. Thank you for showing me he still matters." Reporters pushed microphones in my face. But I looked at the girl, walked straight toward her, and said the only thing that mattered. So does yours. Friday came like Judgment Day, not just for me, but for the walls, the robes, and the silence they would hidden behind for too long. The courtroom was packed. They had to open 2 overflow rooms to seat the media. Legal observers, civil rights organizations, even clergy. C-SPAN aired it live. The internet called it the trial that tried the system. I sat alone at the defense table, not in rags this time. A retired judge had sent me a freshly dry-cleaned gray suit and note, "We failed you. Stand tall." I did. Shelley sat in the back, not next to me. That was our agreement, she would advised, but this was my voice. My reckoning. Judge Jefferson Stone walked in slower than usual. His usual swagger dulled, his gaze heavier. He looked not like a man in power, but like a man walking a tightrope made of legacy. He cleared his throat. This court convenes for sentencing in the case of the state versus Michael James Halbrook. He glanced at me, then at the gallery, then away from both. Before we proceed, the court acknowledges the extraordinary developments surrounding this case. The court has reviewed newly submitted documents, amicus briefs, and public commentary. He stopped. For a second, I wondered if he would break. He did not, but he bent. "I will permit Mr. Halbrook to address the court prior to final judgment." I stood, walked to the podium, and faced the gallery, not the judge. I did not come here to avoid jail. I came here to put the real criminal on trial, the system that created me. Cameras clicked. I do not mean any one person. I do not even mean Judge Stone, though his conduct deserves its own conversation. A flicker of movement at the judge's jaw. I mean the mechanism, the machinery that allows a man to lose his family, his career, his health, and then punishes him for surviving the aftermath. I paused. My fall did not happen overnight. Happened because I could not get help, because I was too proud, because the city had no beds left for men like me, but plenty of cells. I turned now, slowly, to face Stone. You say, I broke the law. But what do we call it when the law breaks people? Stone said nothing. The entire room did. Your Honor, I do not ask for leniency. I ask for a moment of courage from you, from this court, and from this country, not just to free me, but to see me, and everyone like me. I returned to my seat. You could hear someone crying in the back row. Stone looked down for a long time. Then he spoke. Ma. Halbrook. You are correct? This court has failed to apply the law with compassion. With humanity. He inhaled deeply. The defendant is hereby found not guilty under the necessity defense. A murmur. He raised his hand. Furthermore, this court is forwarding a recommendation to the State Bar to consider full reinstatement of Halbrook's license to practice law. My heart did not beat. It thundered, and he added, I am requesting a formal review of this bench's own behavior, in light of the allegations presented during these proceedings. There it was, the robe cracking, the system shaking. Shelley smiled from her seat. Outside, I stepped into the sunlight for the first time as a free man in years, not free from hunger or hardship, but from shame. From invisibility, reporters mobbed me. I kept walking. A mother grabbed my arm, tears on her cheeks. My son was arrested last year. He did not make it out. But you made us feel like someone was finally fighting back. I did not know what to say, so I just nodded. At the steps of the courthouse, I stood tall, lifted my hands, and spoke not to the press, but to the world. This was never about a sandwich. Pause. It was about dignity, about a man who lost everything except the law carved into his soul. The flashbulbs exploded, but I did not blink, because for the first time in a long time, I belonged. I always thought standing ovations were reserved for grand theaters or war heroes, not for men like me, not for men who smelled like shelters and had memories full of ghosts. But on the morning I walked back into the old lecture hall at Georgetown Law, my alma mater, that is exactly what happened. They rose before I even reached the podium. Students, professors, journalists, janitors, people who had never met me, never seen my victories or my losses, but who knew that somewhere, somehow, I would earn this moment. The dean, Dra. Meredith Walsh, introduced me with tears in her eyes. Today we welcome not only one of our most brilliant alumni, she said, but also a symbol of resilience and moral clarity in a system that too often forgets its own humanity. Please welcome once again Attorney Michael James Halbrook. I did not cry. Not then, but my hands trembled as I gripped the edges of the lectern, not from fear, from the sheer weight of restoration. Thank you, I began softly, for seeing me. Silence. Reverent. Whole. I once stood in this very hall. years ago, teaching a seminar on constitutional interpretation. Back then, I believed the law was perfect, a clean machine, built to sort right from wrong. I paused, but then my world cracked, and I learned that even the strongest machine needs oil, care, and sometimes a heart. Laughter warm and soft rippled through the room. I fell. I said, I lost everything. My family, my home, my reputation, and in that spiral, I came face to face with a truth no textbook prepared me for. Justice without mercy is just cold arithmetic. It keeps score but never heals. I shared the rest. The hunger, the sandwich, the cell, the humiliation, and then the resurrection. Something never left me, I said, placing a hand to my chest. The law, not the job, not the courtroom, but the principle. The living breath of what it should be. Another pause, and then I told them something I had not even told Shelley. I have decided to start a foundation, the Halbrook Initiative, a legal outreach network for the homeless to give them not only representation, but education, to remind them they are not forgotten. And the law is not just a club for the elite. The students burst into applause. Professors nodded. One elderly man, a former judge, wiped his eyes. After the speech, people lined up. Some wanted autographs. Others, just to say thank you. But one boy stood out. He was about 14, too young for college, too serious for childhood. He clutched a tattered folder to his chest and stepped forward with hesitant eyes. "Ma, Halbrook?" he asked. "Yes, my mom's in jail." He said, "She did not steal anything, but they say she did, and we can afford a lawyer. I want to be one someday. Like you." I knelt so we were eye to eye. "You already are," I whispered, "because you believe in her, and in something better." He smiled the kind of smile that does not just stretch lips, but lifts lives. Later that week, I walked into a new office, not in a skyscraper, in a community center on the south side of town. No glass doors, no mahogany desk, just a long table. 3 chairs, a printer from 2009, and a sign that read, "Legal help. No judgment. No fee. Just truth." I spent the next few days taking calls, writing briefs, helping a war veteran appeal a wrongful eviction. Then, on Saturday, something happened that stopped me cold. Shelley dropped by with 2 coffees and a box. "You left this," she said. I opened it. Inside was my old bar card laminated, newly reactivated. Under it, a handwritten note from Judge Crowley. "The robe means nothing without the man. Welcome back, counselor." I stared at it for a long time. Then I hung it on the wall behind my desk beside a photo of Clarissa and Madison. They were smiling. Always smiling. That evening, I closed up the office and stepped out into the golden dusk. Across the street, someone clapped slowly. Then another. A group of people had gathered. No cameras, no stage, just humans, applauding another human for standing again. And this time, I did not feel like I was rising alone. Every crack in the pavement remembers me. The alley besides Andrew's church, where I once curled up in winter under cardboard and prayer. The rusted bench near 5th and Main, where I waited for hours hoping someone would leave behind a half-eaten sandwich. The public library steps, where I read old law books while pretending not to hear the whispers around me. These places, they know me, but I do not walk them the same way anymore. Now, when I pass, people nod. Sometimes they stop and shake my hand. A few call me Mur, Halbrook, others call me Sir, and every so often, someone just holds their gaze a little longer than usual, as if trying to reconcile the man in front of them with the one they once looked past. I do not correct them, because they are not wrong. I was broken, but I am not gone. I now live in a modest 3rd-floor apartment, just 2 blocks from where I used to sleep, behind the convenience store dumpster. It is nothing fancy, just a twin bed, a desk, a lamp, and a kettle I found at a church rummage sale. But every morning, when I pour hot coffee into a chipped mug and watch the sun rise through the dusty blinds, I remember what it felt like not to have a window at all. And that is enough. More than enough. The Halbrook initiative has grown faster than I imagined. We have got 3 volunteer lawyers now, 2 paralegals, and a waiting list longer than our funding. But we keep going. Every case is personal. Every client is a mirror. Yesterday, I represented a woman named Lucinda, a mother of 3, evicted without cause. Her landlord said she looked like trouble. That was the entire reason. We fought. We won. Afterward, Lucinda held my hand and said, "You are the only person who made me feel like I was not disposable." And I realized this was never about redemption. It was about restoration of others and of myself. One afternoon, I received an invitation in the mail. Heavy paper, gold trim, from the Department of Justice. They wanted me to speak on a national panel about homelessness, law, and policy reform. The irony. It would be held in the same federal building I once argued cases in before I lost everything. I said yes, not because I needed to be seen, but because I needed the system to hear what it forgot. That night, I walked back to the old train station, the one where I used to beg for warmth, for eye contact, for anything. I sat on the same bench I once cried on, only this time, I was not invisible. An elderly man shuffled by with a worn backpack and a look I knew too well. I stood, walked over, and handed him the sandwich I would packed for myself. "No strings," I said. "Just lunch." He looked at me like I would just offered him a mansion. And I knew, the smallest things carry the loudest echoes. Later, I returned to my apartment. On my wall was a framed photo of Madison in her recital dress. She never got to play that violin, but I do now. Every case I take, every life I defend, every hand I lift from the ground, that is her song, playing through me. And Clarissa, her picture rests by my bed. Her smile keeps me honest. Her spirit fuels the fire I almost let die. Sometimes, I wonder what they would say if they saw me now. Maybe they would weep. Maybe they would laugh. But I think, above all, they would be proud, because I am not walking out of shadows anymore. I am walking in purpose, in dignity, in light. And as I walk these streets again, I whisper the words that carried me through every courtroom, every cell, every moment of despair. I am still here, and I still matter. In the end, Michael James Halbrook did not walk out of court with riches. He did not ride away in a limousine or sign a book deal. He walked out with something far more powerful: his dignity. From a courtroom that mocked him to a nation that stood behind him, Michael proved that you do not need a title, a home, or a suit to command respect. You just need the truth, courage, and memory that one TB erased. And though he once slept beneath the shadows of towering institutions, he now stands at the front of classrooms, courtrooms, and community centers, restoring what the world nearly took: belief. Belief that law should serve the people. All people, even the ones sleeping on the streets. We live in a world where appearance often outweighs substance, where a man in torn clothes is dismissed before he speaks. But Michael's story reminds us that intelligence can live in a whisper, justice can rise from the gutter, and real power does not come from robes or gavels, but from truth boldly spoken. Everyone has a voice. Some just need to be heard. Did this story move you? Did it make you look differently at the people we often ignore? Then do not let Michael's voice be the only one. Subscribe to our channel for more true stories that break stereotypes and heal hearts. Comment below, we read every message. Share this story with someone who needs to remember. Redemption is real, dignity never dies, and one voice can change the system. See you in the next story. And remember, truth echoes louder than any gavel.